All right. Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of today's Space Roundup. So the for those of you who have not seen this before, we've been doing it for a little over a week now, and basically we're just going to go through some of our latest photographs, talk about them, talk about the latest stuff going on at Starbase, talk about the latest stuff going on in the general space industry as well, and yeah, we're just going to basically talk about it and go through everything and just have a fun time. That's the point of the show. I'm Nathan. I'll be today's host. I'm a researcher and scriptwriter for What About It. So basically, any information that is wrong in a video, yeah, you could probably blame me. But yeah. So yeah, let's go into it. So the first thing we're starting with. So our photographer John was actually able to go out and do take some photos at night, and well, the Star Factory has a glass wall now. So whenever they turn the lights on inside and you go out at night, you can see basically right through it. And we were able to see some of the progress that SpaceX has been making. So, for example, like you can see here, they've installed some gantry cranes. We just episode before last, we actually talked about them rolling in the hooks for those. So pretty good progress. Those are pretty heavy duty. We also saw we saw gantry cranes basically identical to these being rolled in. It might not be these, it might be, but it was about a month ago we saw the cranes themselves getting rolled in. But yeah, we got some more view. You can see they got the fans in. They got a few things inside. Of course, Tim Dodd just recently did his walkthrough of the factory, so there's we've seen a lot of what has happened, but these are more recent. That walkthrough was months ago. Well, not months ago, weeks ago. Sorry. It feels like months. I mean, the Flight 4 was just crazy, and SpaceX has done so much work in so little time. You just lose track of how much time it's been, and just you think it's been so long, but no, it's only been a few weeks. We're still it was actually 22 days ago as of now, and they are full speed ahead towards Flight 5, so that's pretty cool. All right, next up, we got a steel roll that we caught rolling into the bay, so or into the factory, and this will be turned into a Starship. We see these rolling in quite often, but this time we were able to catch it with our camera, and yeah, this will be turned into a Starship one. And it's kind of crazy. They've only been working on it for a few weeks, and they've basically replaced the majority of the heat shield around the nose. And you can also see down here, it's like that across almost the entire vehicle. They still haven't touched some of the more complicated geometries. They have started to clear them off here. I think y'all can see my mouse pointer. But they have started to clean off around here, but they still haven't gone around like these extremely curved sections. And they we're thinking they will, especially considering this. Okay. Uh, we're working on that. Um, yeah, I think that's. Yeah, it sounds like that's my internet. I'll. Yeah, I don't really think there's too much that can be done for that right now. I mean, it's probably due to like the storm going on outside, honestly. Yeah, sorry. We could we could try yeah. And I could try turning my camera off. That might work. Um, but yeah, I don't know if there's too much that can be done right now. We might just okay. Sounds like it's better now. Let me do let me do one thing real quick. Give me like 10 seconds. Okay. All right. There we go. Hopefully that should have helped a little bit. But yeah, so and it's crazy to see just the progress SpaceX has made. They haven't done too much work along the hinge section yet, but we know they will. Musk basically confirmed that in his latest in the latest interview with that Tim Dodd released, because that's the problem, and he specifically said like that is not going to be the reason that Starship fails, and they're going to reinforce that a lot. I'm because he said that, there could also be the possibility that they're putting something even stronger there, so that they might have had pieces ready for that, and then after the flight they might have determined that those might not have even been strong enough, and they might just be reworking like a lot of the internals. So who knows? They might just have an entirely different geometry. We'll have to see what SpaceX ends up doing with this section, but so far it's been untouched. But the rest of the vehicle is, I mean, it's crazy to see just how much they've done. And it's on the pinned and the glued sections as well. So they've worked on the glued sections around the nose cone. And yeah, you can see here here's a closer picture of the forward flaps, and you can see they're still missing a few tiles here and there, probably the ones that are just slightly different, or they're just doing them in order. Yeah, even more close-ups, and you can see as well, like you can see the white fabric. So whenever SpaceX added the ablative cover, we kind of thought that they might just only add that, but they did end up adding the white silicone felt on top as well. So it's that ablative, the felt on top, and then the tile. And that's basically the order they ended up doing it, which might also be the reason. So Musk specifically said during the interview with Tim Dodd that they had 2 ablative test tiles. Now, we knew that they at least had one because we could see it. We weren't sure exactly what it was at the time. We thought it might have been a thinner tile or just something. We weren't entirely sure. And we were able to see it, and we caught it in the pictures. And then they had 2 other missing tiles with felt on top. So we were able to see the ablative, and it's likely that that was the single layer, or that we're not sure which one it was, but he said one was a single layer, one was a double layer, and double layer survived. But basically, we only saw one. For sure. It's likely the felt sections had the ablative underneath, as opposed to just nothing underneath, which is what we originally thought. Yeah, here's this is from the next day. So he was able to get some pictures during the night and during the day. So you can see the red adhesive that's kind of poking through a little bit. And they've made a ton of progress just across the entire vehicle, and you can see on the nose cone as well. It's pretty far into being done. This is the aft flap. You can see they're still missing quite a few tiles down here as well. So even though they're getting closer to being done up there, there's still a lot of work to be done. You can see like tons of missing pins, and they've basically only focused on just getting all the tiles off here, and then they're focusing top down essentially. Here's some more pictures, and you can see that ablative layer on the fins. Here's a farther away picture that we were able to get. That is ship 31 in the this is the high bay, actually. That's not the mega bay. So yeah, there's been a bit of work that's been done, but nothing too noticeable. We'll occasionally see like something working on it, but most of the focus does appear to be on ship 30, which makes sense. I mean, they're replacing the entire heat shield. All right, so moving on now, we got the tower sections. We've got a few pictures of those, and SpaceX has basically just been working on those to prep them for stacking. The first tower section, we'll talk about it more once we get to the launch pad itself, but they're likely going to be ready to roll these over within a week or so, or at least one of them. Although they might also just wait for the concrete to cure a little more, because you don't want to just instantly stack stuff on wet concrete. It's not exactly a good idea. And they've been slowly working on filling up the foundation with concrete. But it shouldn't be too much longer before they head over there. This was just a nice picture our photographer took. It's a long exposure where he basically just zoomed in, so you get this cool effect. I liked it, so thought I'd share. Yeah, so here's from the day after. So that was the night pictures, and you can see the crews are working, and you can see just how much like I should probably show a comparison, but essentially the first towers had the tower 1, whenever they were stacking it, those sections had nothing. These have the pipe work. They have basically most of the work that SpaceX needs to do has been done on the ground, and they're just going to roll those over. And that also means stacking operations are going to be done pretty quickly. Yeah. So here's some close-ups of the work being done. And now moving on from the tower section a bit, because like I said, we'll cover that a little bit more once we cover the launch site. This is actually the new office building. So there is a bit of rust, but that's not anything to worry about. It's basically all just the surface layer, because when you're working next to the ocean, things are going to rust fast. And they're gonna paint that later to make sure that doesn't happen. But for now, it's not a big deal because it's like extremely thin, so no problems. But yeah, a lot of work has been done. I'm really looking forward to seeing this completed, because it's honestly, it's a pretty cool building. Once it's done, I feel like it'll just complete the entire look of the Star Factory, and that's where a lot of the engineering stuff is going to be done as well. So lots of work will be done in there, and yeah, I can't wait to see it completed. But you can kind of tell SpaceX has their priorities because they have engineering buildings elsewhere, and they don't fully need this one quite yet, especially. So they've especially been focusing on the Star Factory. All right, so here is basically, yeah, this is what we've covered so far. They do have the Mega Bay 2's bay door open, but there's not really anything inside there right now, so not really too much to cover on that end. And yeah, you can kind of just see how big everything is there. It's yeah. All right, so next up we got what most people are probably looking forward to, because there might have been a few events that happened at the launch pad. But before we head over there, don't forget to like the stream so more people can find it. And of course, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a lot. And we're trying to get the space roundups in often. We're trying to get it to basically every day, and we're also starting to cover launches as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can watch some launches with us and find out about what's going on just at Starbase and around the space industry as well. All right, so off to the launch site, where we've got another tank getting scrapped. So they're down to 2 right now. And they've just shredded through these tanks. The shells were torn off in a matter of like days, and now the tanks themselves are, I mean, one of them's already gone and it's already hooked up to the next one, so likely by the end of today it'll be off its pedestal and probably already halfway gone. And by next episode, I wouldn't be surprised if we're like, oh yeah, one tank is scrapped and the other one is halfway gone already, because they are just shredding it. All right, off to the tower stand. So I did say we'd talk about this a bit more later. So SpaceX has been working on filling this up with concrete over the past few days, about a week now, actually. But essentially, these metal piles were brought in, and actually a lot of it is essentially just hollow. And they brought those in, and then they brought in a giant like well, not giant. They just brought in a bunch of concrete trucks. It would be brought in one giant concrete truck to fill this whole thing, but no, it was multiple. And yeah, they're basically just filling it up to make sure it's sturdy enough to hold everything. Yeah, you can see a bunch of workers just working around to make sure that it's prepped for the tower sections. And you can see down here as well, the holes there. I need to look at Tower 1 to see which side is which, but one of these will be for the drawworks, which is essentially how they operate the chopsticks, which is the giant arms that's going to catch the booster and ship midair. So it's a pretty important piece. And then the other one is for piping and everything like that, because you got to run it through the tower eventually, and it's best to run it through the protected area. All right. So we got some more pictures. You can see here even more work being done on those piles. And of course, to stack the tower, you need a gigantic crane. And yeah, now it's vertical. So that's pretty cool. You can see down here, it does have some pieces missing. So it's not at its full height, which is kind of crazy because this thing is already gigantic, but it's going to get even taller. And yeah, it's able to do some work now. For those who don't remember, back when Tower 1 stacked, they had a crane that was actually smaller than this, but it had some pieces missing as well whenever it started first stacking the tower. But once they got higher up, and now they added those pieces just because they didn't need them before, so why add them? And yeah, they finished the stacking. So they could start rolling over the tower sections now for stacking, of course, once the base is ready for them, and then assemble it, and then later add the rest of the pieces to the crane to make it its full height. So yeah, they will be working on that a lot. Of course, here's another picture, and you can actually see the crane that's this isn't a tank that's getting scrapped, the other one is, but yeah. And you can see just like you can kind of tell it's missing some pieces. It's just kind of, it just looks like it's missing stuff up there. And once it's got those pieces though, it's going to be tall. It's a very large crane. Yeah, here's another angle of it. And yeah, before I play that, I think we all, for those of you who haven't heard, SpaceX decided to do something with Booster 14.1. And to be honest, I think we're all kind of confused. Well, I guess not confused, because we know why they did it. It's just nobody was expecting it. Like we predicted they might do a drop test, perhaps to like test the catching mechanism and the pins again, but I guess they feel like they're comfortable with it already, because that's not what they did. And I guess the video is the best way to show what they did. So yeah, they whacked it. Why? I don't think anybody had this on their bingo card. That's all I'm gonna say. But it does make sense. SpaceX is a very unorthodox company, and their philosophy is basically just do what works. And I guess slapping the booster is what works for them. So the reason they're doing this is, let me just get that out of the way real quick. All right. So the reason they're doing this is basically to test the integrity of the tank and the chopsticks as well. And you can also see this video was not sped up. That is how fast the chopsticks can move. We hadn't really seen them move that fast before in the past, but now we have. And yeah, essentially what was likely being done here was just smacking it to see what the steel can take and what the arms can take. Now, they did add those rubber pads to the arms. If you recall back a few weeks ago, we mentioned they reapplied some essentially like padding to the arms for this essentially. They did have to remove those. Well, it's on there now, obviously, but they had to remove it for a little bit because it had damaged some ship heat shield tiles, but they seem to have figured that out. And now they're just using those pads as essentially like a bumper, just to like a bumper on a bumper car to make sure nothing gets damaged. And yeah, so they're just whacking it. This is not the only time they did it, by the way. I'm not sure of the exact number, but I know it's a lot. I know it's at least 6, just off the top of my head. So they were basically just whacking the booster. It makes sense though. Because whenever the booster's coming into land, these chopsticks need to move fast, and they're going to whack the booster whenever it's coming down. So they need to make sure that the chopsticks can handle it and the booster can handle it. And I mean, SpaceX, like they love their testing, their prove it by testing philosophy, essentially, where they'll just build it and test it. And yeah, they built it and tested it, and the testing involved just whacking a test tank over and over again with giant metal chopsticks. It's space is hard, but space is also weird sometimes. Yeah. So, of course, our photographer was able to get some pretty close-ups of the, or some pretty close-ups of the boost post whacking. And you can see like you can see a few marks here and there, but it seems to have held up pretty good. All things considered, you can see some lines that broke, but I mean, a few lines breaking is not gonna be like a few electrical cables breaking isn't gonna be too big a problem, likely, unless those are like running. Yeah, those are likely just sensors at most, and most likely those sensors are actually just for this test. So the things that are broken are likely there just for the test and aren't going to be there in the future. So yeah, it held up pretty good, and you saw how fast and how essentially aggressive the whack was. So this is a pretty good sign for the future. I know, at least for me, I was a bit concerned that it was just gonna crush the booster whenever it went in to grab it, but I mean, I guess SpaceX was too, which is why they tested it, and sure enough, the booster looks like it can withstand it. Yeah, here's some even closer pictures. You can see that frayed line there. We'll of course take some closer looks at it later, but everything seems to have held up pretty good. Most of the markings are just seem to be things that were there before. And yeah, you can see a few marks here and there, but overall it seemed to have held up pretty good. I think that was actually an accidental photo because I already had that. Yeah. Yeah. This is still post whack. And you can kind of see like it looks fine, which is really awesome. And it basically means that if I remember correctly, the booster has now been taken off the orbital launch stand. So it seems like they've completed most of the testing they wanted to do, and this might have been the only testing they wanted to do. Of course, they could still want to do a drop test, Possibly, probably not though. This could have been the only test they wanted to do with the tank. But we'll definitely keep you updated on that. So be sure to subscribe if you want those updates on what the heck they're doing with this booster. That was, yeah, I don't think anybody was expecting that. Okay. Here's some close-ups of the chopsticks as well. So you can see the chopsticks look fine as well. Will look fine too. You saw in the, and you could see in the video, the chopsticks just fully bent whenever they went in to whack the booster. Just the inertia of the giant steel bars ended up twisting them a little bit, but they seem to be just fine. And of course, that hopefully shouldn't be a problem as much in the future, because SpaceX plans on essentially chopping these in half and making them much shorter. Yeah, we got some more close-up photos. Of course, the pins that were slightly damaged after those tests. Now, the reasoning why I'm kind of leaning towards maybe them not actually doing a drop test is because they know sorry about that, guys. Let me. All right. Slight technical difficulties. We're getting stuff worked out real quick. Hello, hello. Test 1, 2. Am I back? Can you hear me? Come on, I want to tell you. All right. Yay. All right. So it should be working now. If it's not, please let us know. Thank you so much for letting us know. Yeah. So this was a pretty interesting event. A Russian satellite broke up. We're still not entirely sure why. I've looked around. It doesn't seem like we can find any specific sources. And I mean, it could have been hit by a piece of space junk. There's a bunch of it in low Earth orbit. And yeah, it broke up. It was at a fairly low Could it be the noise gate? All right. We should be back. Sorry about that. Jeez. I'll try and get that fixed in the future. It hasn't been a problem in the past. That's why I'm thinking it's the storm, because it's pretty bad outside. I got a tornado like 30 minutes ago. So yeah, that might be a problem. So yeah, if you hear a bunch of wind going and I have to run away, you know why. But yeah, it's up in low Earth orbit, and it's not good. I'm pretty sure most people have heard, or most space fans have heard of Kessler syndrome, which is basically just the idea that it only takes a few satellites breaking up and forming space debris before a whole domino effect just destroys low Earth orbit, essentially, with satellites and debris just crashing into each other. But this could have been a case where a piece of debris struck the satellite, perhaps like in a fuel tank that was pressurized, and broke it up. This doesn't appear to have been an anti-satellite test, but this was a Russian satellite, so it's not out of the possibilities, especially given the current situation. But of course, we're not sure. We don't know. And as of now, we only have speculation. We'll do some more research. If we find out anything, we'll probably let you know in the next episode or the next Space Roundup. But yeah, not a good thing. All right. Oh, actually, I was going to close this real quick because we have a big announcement from NASA. So, like I said, lots of ISS news. NASA made a pretty big announcement, and that's essentially that they selected who's going to deorbit the International Space Station. I might have slightly spoiled it a little bit by accidentally clicking to the next picture, but that's fine. Yeah. I'm pretty sure most of us saw this coming, all things considered. They were considering a few options, but essentially they chose SpaceX to deorbit the International Space Station. Oh, excuse me. Now, it makes a lot of sense. SpaceX has the Crew Dragon, the Cargo Dragon. They've been working on the ISS for years now. They have a fairly reliable track record. And yeah, they got a pretty decent chunk of change to do it too. I'm looking for the exact number. Yeah, 843 million for a potential value. So we'll see what like that finally ends up being, because it could go over, could go under, but likely isn't going likely isn't going to go over because it's a single award contract. Wait, I think that just means it's, never mind. It could go over. We'll yeah, I'll look into it a little bit more, but 843 million is the current value of it. But yeah, SpaceX was selected. They'll deorbit the International Space Station after 2030. Yeah, end of its operational life in 2030. So the ISS still has a couple years, but it's running on fumes essentially. It's got at least 6 years till the 2030s. But unfortunately, there are other space companies that are trying to launch space stations. So let's get back to the photos. So yeah, it's in the specific announcement that NASA made, it didn't say how SpaceX was going to do it, what their like proposed plan was. So they might use probably not Crew Dragon. They might use Cargo Dragon to do it. Of course, they do have some pretty beefy engines on them, on the Crew and Cargo Dragon. Actually, sorry, the Cargo Dragon doesn't have any, but it does have the spots for it because they're very similar designs. And SpaceX could end up using similar architecture because SpaceX likes to reuse parts. Of course, they could also just use Starship because that, and if it's by 2030, Starship has to be operational at the very least to land us on the moon. So it would make sense, especially because it's also, they're going to have to equip a Starship at some point with an international docking adapter, because the Orion capsule is docking to it. So it would be a sight to see, indeed, to see a gigantic Starship docked to the International Space Station, just bringing it home. Of course, it wouldn't be fully bringing it home. It would just be bringing it back in a blaze of glory, unfortunately, for the International Space Station. Now, the entire International Space Station isn't getting deorbited. JAXA has a deal with, I believe it was Axiom, to essentially take their module off the ISS and put it on Axiom's upcoming station. So there'll be a piece of it still alive, which I think is pretty cool. All right. So next up, like I said, lots of information on the ISS. There was a fluid leak. It seemed to be pretty bad from the reports that came out, but essentially, fortunately, this was before they got on the actual spacewalk. But there was a spacewalk planned, and a bunch of fluids ended up leaking whenever they were getting the suit ready for the spacewalk, and it leaked into the airlock, and they're not sure what caused it, which is not a good thing, because if you know what caused it, then you can try and find a solution. If you don't know what caused it and there is a very large problem, then that's an engineer's nightmare. Because you don't know what to do in that case, and you're just trying to find out what went wrong. And yeah, water can be pretty dangerous in zero gravity. You can see here, like, it looks like a fun little blob, but when there's a lot of it, especially if it's, for example, trapped with you in a spacesuit, it is not fun. And this has happened in the past. We have had at least 2 situations where water, in particular from the, I believe it was from the coolant system for one, and I don't remember the exact source from the other, but I believe it was also the coolant system, ended up leaking into the, like, visor area of the astronaut. And that is very dangerous, because if the water, like, covers your face, it's hard to see. It can get in your eyes. It can get around your nose and mouth and make it more difficult to breathe. It's not a fun situation to be in, and it's kind of another example of these spacesuits that we have been using for many years now. The spacesuits that NASA has been using are very old, and they're, a lot of the contractors that made pieces for the suits essentially stopped making them years ago, and NASA is running out of inventory for those parts. And for some parts, they've just completely run out of inventory, and they're just trying to find workaround solutions. So it's starting to become a problem, and this is just another sign of how old those spacesuits are getting. And yeah, currently they are working on new spacesuits for the International Space Station and, of course, the moon. So hopefully this shouldn't be a problem for too much longer. But yeah, the longer those spacesuits are used, the more likely incidents like this are to happen. And essentially they need a solution fast. Yeah. All right, next up. So this will actually be our final story for today. We've got Dream Chaser. So this story is about the first flight of Dream Chaser, and in particular the first flight on Vulcan, because Dream Chaser has been having a slight bit of a problem recently. It's delayed by a bit. The problem with this, now, for most launch vehicle, or for most payloads, if you get delayed, it's not too big a deal. The rocket essentially moves with the payload, and it's not too big a deal. For Dream Chaser, it's a little bit more of a problem, because Dream Chaser is launching on United Launch Alliance's Vulcan for its first flight. Dream Chaser was actually supposed to be the second flight of Vulcan, but unfortunately, because it took so long, Vulcan has essentially had to say, we can't launch Dream Chaser right now. And because ULA doesn't have before there is another Vulcan, even if Dream Chaser gets done. And the reason they did this is because they're trying to get approved for national security launches. They have a because they need to complete certain qualifications safe to fly multi-billion-dollar, highly secretive, highly expensive, like spy satellites and other essentially U.S. national security payloads. And the second flight of Vulcan was supposed to essential steps. But because it's been pushed back so long, ULA has essentially said, we might just launch Vulcan with a mass simulator or something of the kind, or maybe just a few satellites or something. So this is a bit unfortunate to being done right now, and that might push back the launch a little bit. Of course, Dream Chaser does still need some time. Like I said, it is still delayed, but it's getting close to done, and it seems like they're going to have to find another Vulcan to fly on before they can do their first full of news for today. We did also upload a video this morning, so if you haven't seen that, you should definitely go and check it out. I thought it was really good, and it had a lot of interesting information in it. And yeah, you should definitely check that out. Of course, if you haven't liked the stream already, be sure to do that. And if you haven't seen all the latest stuff that's happening in space right now. And yeah, that's basically it for today. And yeah, I'm gonna head out now. I hope you have a good day or evening or morning or night, just whatever time it is for you. I hope you have a good time. And that's it from me. See ya.